early today. I didn't want you to think I wasn't interested, but I have to leave a little early.
Okay, employment. The tornadoes, okay? Yes. For you? Okay. Question. Mr. Jack, can you pray to start? And all these prayer requests here?
Father, we're thankful for the opportunity to work today. Thank you for loving us and taking care of us. At this time, we remember those that were just mentioned who need your prayers. We ask that you be with them, bless them, heal them, protect all that needs your help. We're thankful for our congregation here. We just ask that you continue to bless us all, and may we do everything in our power to spread your kingdom in our community. Be with our class this morning, our fellowship, and especially be with us as we bring the lessons today. Know, Father, that we make mistakes, and we ask you to help us correct those as we take our walk in life. Again, thank you for loving us and taking care of us. In Christ's name.
Amen. Very good. So, last class, it was a little bit dense. And this one is a little bit more. Then, what I think is going to happen is that I have to break this class in two. Today, part one, and the next one, the part two. Why this? Because I want you to understand what's happened here. There's an institution, the name is Pew Research Center. They make a lot of service and research on statistics along United States, and there's statistics about religious people and stuff like that. And Christian people do not read the Old Testament. They ask them how much you read the Bible, and they say like 3 times a week and stuff like that. How much you read the New Testament, and they answer like 90% of read. and 10% just the Old Testament. When they asked them what parts of the Old Testament, they respond Proverbs, Psalms. They are missing all the Old Testament. And the question is why you just read these books. And the main answer was, because I do not understand the other parts. And it's because it's very heavy. And what I want you to do is explain the Old Testament, or the literature, the history of the Old Testament. And I hope you are not part of this group, and I hope we all can enjoy the Old Testament. It's beautiful. We will start with that. Okay, now? Nice. The question, what is the Old Testament? Let me hear your voices. What is the Old Testament? Yes, Mr. Reed?
It's the covenant between God and his people, and expressing himself to his people, who he is and what his plan is and his history.
Okay. What else? I need another answer. Yes, Ms. Guadalupe.
If we don't have a past, we cannot understand the future and ours.
Okay.
In the past, we can learn a lot, and that's what I did.
Nice. Okay, what else? Old Testament? Mr. Bill.
It's everything but the new covenant with Jesus.
Okay, very good. So we define, your answers are very good, okay? You are doing beautiful. The Old Testament is a set of books considered the main written record of the ancient people of God in their 3 stages, and put attention to it. I said the people of God in 3 stages. The stage number 1 is the Hebrew people. The stage number 2 is the people of Israel. And the stage number 3 is the Jewish people. And the question is, but we read the Old Testament and all we see is Israel. And the answer is no. We tend to think that all we read from Genesis to Malachi is Israel. But we need to explain a little bit more. When we have, for example, the book of Genesis, and all you read the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, stuff like that, until Joseph, when Joseph come with his family to Egypt, what we have is the Hebrew people. And you can read it in the book of Genesis. They call it the Hebrew people. And what is the meaning of the word Hebrew? The ones who cross. After they cross, specifically the sea with Moses, and they set on Canaan, they become the people of Israel. Now they got a name. Now they are a nation. Now they are sedentary. They were what? Nomads. How do we know? They were walking around the wilderness, and you can see it. Why do you think they have sacrifices with animals? Because the animals are the benefit of the nomads. You don't have plants or sowers when you are nomad, just when you are sedentary, when you are in a land. Now you understand why God loves more the sacrifice of Abel, an animal. The nomads versus sedentary people. So I said, people of Israel, when they are a nation, and the Jewish people after the exile, they are the same people but in 3 stages. And in order to understand the Old Testament, we need to understand these 3 stages. These three stages are different, even in the language, and I will explain a little bit more. This compilation of books is considered a product of divine inspiration, and we talked about about that last Sunday. We mentioned it, but just to be clear, in order to refreshment, just two languages in Old Testament, Hebrew and Aramaic. And what I said, the three stages, because before the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, they spoke Paleo-Hebrew. It's another language. So we have three languages: Paleo-Hebrew, the Hebrew people; the Hebrew as we know it, the people of Israel; and Aramaic after the exile. Are we okay with that? Okay. And as I told you, these three are dead languages. Nobody speak, not even a people, a town, a country speak these three languages. You can study, if you are studying theology or Bible studies, you have to take 3 classes of Hebrew. You'll be tired. It's very hard. I can tell you. But are these 3 languages. Something interesting. Do you know what is that? It doesn't say Yahweh. What it says? And it is because the Hebrew do not have vowels. We have vowels. The English, Spanish, and modern languages have vowels. Ancient languages, they don't have vowels. They have how can I say it? Syllabs. You know what. But as an ancient languages, and I ask you and you say Yahweh, how do you know we have an A and an E? Just because something that we call the Masoretes. The Masoretes, and I will explain it just a little bit, was a group of scholars, Hebrew scholars in the ancient world. They said, we need to make the people understand our languages. 1, 2. This class come to you thanks to, I don't know, Chick-fil-A, something like that. Okay. How many books do we have in Old Testament? 39 books. And as I was explaining last Sunday, we have 3 groups. The canonical books, the 39 that we have, the Deuterocanonical, and I mentioned the ones, Judith, Tobit, the Wisdom, Ben Sira, the Maccabees and stuff like that, and the Apocryphal, all the books that you can read, the Book of Enoch, the Assumption of Moses, and there are books forbidden for the church. That's the meaning of Apocryphal. How is divided the Old Testament? That's interesting. We have a very traditional classification of the Old Testament, but I will tell you the traditional Jewish classification, Hebrew classification. Interesting. The name Old Testament, they used to call it the Hebrew Bible. The name Old Testament come with a father of the church, Mellitus from Sardis. You don't need to learn the name. I'm just telling you. In the 2nd century, he says this is the Old Testament in his writing, and it comes popular in church, and now we have it here. We call it Old Testament. But the original name that Hebrew people and Jewish people used to have is Hebrew Bible. For that reason, if you read academic books, they will call it Hebrew Bible, not Old Testament. It is the same. It's just a thing, okay. They call the Old Testament Tanakh. T-N-K. Tanakh. And what Tanakh name means? Torah. Do you know what is it, right? What is it? The first 5 books. What is the other name that would give it? Nice. The second division is Navim. It's a Hebrew name. It means the prophets. Yes?
No, the second name of the Torah.
Tanakh. T-A-N-A-K. No, I'm not on the... Okay, sorry. Thank you. We have Nabim here, the prophets, and we have Ketubim. It means the scrolls. What is the interesting thing here? What we call Torah, or the 5 books, is, we know it, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Easy. Here comes the difference. The Nabim, what is the meaning of Nabim? Prophets. Nice, beautiful. They divided in 2 groups. The prior prophets and the post-prophets. The prior prophets are Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. And the interesting thing is, why they have Joshua as a prophet? We have it as an historical book, but they have it as a prophet, and I will tell you why. And the after prophets, just as we have it, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, the minor prophets. But Daniel is not among the prophets. I will tell you. Just give me a couple of seconds. And the Ketubim, or the scrolls, we have Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes. Sorry, Lamentations is not here, it's here. That's a typo. Esther, Daniel, Nehemiah, Ezra, Chronicles. Now I'll explain why. When we talk about prophets, if I ask you what is a prophet, maybe you will say it is someone who speaks about the future. That's not a prophet. That's a modern definition of a prophet. And it's a bad definition of a prophet. The meaning of prophet, according to the Bible, and I mean the Old Testament, is the one who speaks on behalf of God, interpreting history. That's what the prophets do. They see the society, they see the world, and they analyze the society. For that reason, if you read the prophets, you will see Isaiah saying and Jeremiah and stuff like that. If you don't do A, you will receive be. They're analyzing story. You don't see that in Daniel. Daniel is not analyzing story. Are you understanding why? Why they have Joshua among the prophets? Because Joshua is analyzing story. For that reason, they have also Samuel among the prophets and the book of Kings. Because for the Old Testament, prophets are the ones who can analyze history and talk on behalf of God. Not the future. That's forecasting. And we are not talking about a forecast of the weather, stuff like that. We are talking about the present. But the interesting thing is, the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, for the Hebrews, they just have 24 books. We have 39. The question is, why? We have the same books. Don't be afraid of. It's because Samuel, for them, is just one book. Kings is just one book, and we have it divided in two. Jeremiah Lamentations is just one book, and we have it as two. Nehemiah, Ezra, that's a one book, and we have it two. The Chronicles, just one book, and we have two. For that reason, they have just 24. We have 39. The same amount of books, the same material, but they compiled in one book, the one that we have divided in two. Are we okay with that? Nice. Do you understand that division?
Where's Psalms?
Yeah, where's Psalms and Job and Proverbs?
Here. It's here. I forgot.
Job is in that one too?
Yeah. Job and the Psalms, they have it here in the Ketuvim scrolls. I forgot to put it here. Thank you. And thank you. But they have it here as scrolls. As we understand that, and I will explain a little bit more about when they were written, the stages of the people of Israel, the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, as you want to call it, we have the first stage is the, what is what? What characters do you have here? Nice. You can write the whole book of Genesis is here. After that, the book of Exodus. After that, the Judges era. What books of the Bible you have here? The Judges, there's a little one, there's one more. The book of Ruth is here. What books do you have here? That's easy.
Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
Nice. And the book of Joshua too is classified here. United Kingdom, what books do you have here? Nice, Samuel. And what part of the book of the Kings? Nice. And here, another part of the book of the Kings, but also the Chronicles and the prophets. You have here the exile. Which one? You have Jeremiah. Daniel is more here, but you have Ezekiel. You have the Lamentations. In the books of exile, you have the Haggai, you have Malachi, you have Zachary, you have the book of Daniel, and stuff like that. Nice. I will explain a little bit more that. As you can see it here. And I will explain why I have the Psalms in red. Do you have questions until here?
This is probably not part of this, but you hear about the Torah all the time with like the Arab country. Is that just part of what that's all they look at? They don't look at the rest of the Old Testament?
Can you repeat it? I think I got it, but I need it. Can you?
Do modern Jews read the rest of the Bible or only just the Torah?
I will explain that. I will explain that. Just give me a couple of minutes. So we have the Torah, and we have, now you know it, what we have here, the content of these 5 books, the origins of humanity, but also origin and formation, liturgy and purity laws, and Israel's journey into the wilderness and relationship with God, great stories and characters of the Bible. Easy, and I will explain it. If we got the historical books, we have Joshua, Judges. That's our modern classification of the books. Oh. Question for you. What is the difference between the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles? They talk a lot about kings, but what's the difference between them? Have you ever read those books? Okay. They mention the same kings, but what's the difference? Why they are mentioning the same story? And I will explain. The book of Kings is more focused on the political view of Israel. Chronicles is focused on spiritual life of Israel. Okay? If you read the book of Kings, you will see they mention a lot what the kings did. Political view, the relations between the kings of Israel and other kings. But if you read the book of Chronicles, they will focus on the spiritual life of the kings. For example, there's a war, the Syro-Ephraimite war, between Syria and the kingdom of the north. If you read the book of the Kings, they will focus on their political views, political relationships, the war, how many people died, and stuff like that. If you read the Chronicles, they will focus on how the people felt at that moment. That's the difference. Chronicles. Are we okay with that? No, I don't like it. Are we okay with that? Yes. Nice, that's the spirit. Okay. Historical books. The history of the king, spiritual decline of Israel, entry of idolatry into Israel, birth of Israel as a kingdom, as you remember, Samuel, Saul, David, and the history of the prophets. If you read the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, you will note that Hosea, Isaiah, and another prophets are mentioned in these books. But other prophets that they are not writer prophets, like Nathan, like Gad, and another prophets. The major prophets that we have is Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Lamentations, and the prophets, the minor 12 prophets. Who made this division? A father of the church named Jerome. He made it. What is the content of the prophets? Consequences of sin, final of Israel as a kingdom, history of exile, messianic prophecy, history of ancient empires. And the wisdom books, we know it, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Songs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. Then, the importance of that, of the wisdom literature. Cultural wisdom, godly worldview, expressions of worship, ancient wisdom for a modern world. Questions until here? Okay.
All this is absolutely interesting. I cannot take notes fast enough. Are you giving copies or anything?
I can send this.
So appreciated.
For that reason, I said this is going to be dense, and I know it. And for that reason, I'm including here these question sections in case you miss something or you have you need to clarify something. As I'm talking, you can stop me and say, I have a question. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes?
The chronological Bible, does that really put it all in order where it makes sense, or?
Yeah. And I'll explain the chronology. I will explain I have a map here. The chronological process of the Old Testament. Yes, sir?
My father taught us to, because it was hard to remember which ones go where, just 5, 12, 5, 5, 12. And that lets you put them all, 5, Pentateuch,
That's nice. Remember it. to learn it. That's beautiful. Also, we can study. Do you remember when you were at school and you were talking about history and geography, and the teacher says that we have many geological eras like Bronze Age and Iron Age and stuff like that? We have that. We have that in Bible, and I will mention. That's the world of the Old Testament. There's a big map here. We are not here, United States, Dominican Republic. We are here, just a little bit more, maybe where Miss Julie is in the map, if the map continues. But this is the world of the Old Testament. That's where Old Testament happened. The Libyan desert, a little bit more here. Israel were slaves in Egypt. And remember, Egypt was divided, the down Egypt, the upper Egypt. We have it in upper Egypt here. They crossed here, the Red Sea, they crossed it here, and they come from the Mount Sinai when Moses received the laws, and they start the journey here in the wilderness. We have this here. All the Old Testament, the Torah, the first 5 books happened here. After that, the judges, they said, the book of Joshua, Judges and Ruth, they said here. We have Babylon here, we have Syria here, and we have all these nations, Assyria, coming here. So that's the map. What they call the Sea of Galilee is just a little lake is here. They call it the Sea of Gennesaret too. The Sea of Galilee, the Lake of Galilee, as you want to call it. The Dead Sea is just here, and we have the Mediterranean Sea here. All the Old Testament happened here. So why I'm mentioning this? Because geography is so important for the Old Testament. If you read the Gospels, and I will give you an example of New Testament to understand it easier, every time the writers of the gospel are talking about Jerusalem, they are talking about they go up to Jerusalem. They are not mentioned they go down. Even if they are here, they are saying they are going up to Jerusalem. Why that? But it's another explanation. It's a theological explanation. They call Jerusalem as the Holy Land, and the Holy Land is never down, it's always up. The upper mention means a closeness with God. For that reason, they never mention as going down, going up. And if you read the book of Kings, you will read, it's the chapter 18 of the book of Kings, you will read it. In a war, they said, our God gave us mountains, and for that reason, the foreign nations cannot invade us. They see the mountains as a wall coming from God. Geography is important. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining geography. It's hard, I know. Do you have questions on that? Okay. Now we will have fun here. And I will explain chronologically what happened here. Let's go very slow to explain that. The Bronze Age. Bronze Age is the age of the humanity where they don't know iron. And if you read the book of Genesis, the book of Exodus, and Leviticus, you don't have mentions of iron, but bronze tools. It's happening here. That's the history. That's the main divisions of history. And we have books here that were written in the same age. And we have the book of Genesis here, Abraham, stuff like that. But in the same time of Genesis, we have Job. Job is happening inside the Genesis. We have it in different places in the Bible, but they are happening in the same time. After that, we have the history of Exodus. But in case you don't know it, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are not different stories. These three books are happening inside the book of Exodus. After the chapter 25 of the book of Exodus, we have the book of Leviticus. In the 32, more or less, we have Numbers and Deuteronomy. So they are not like, first comes the history of the Exodus, after that, no. They are happening in the same moment. But these three books are assuming in the history of the Exodus. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Nice. Question. I'm not telling you that they were written in this moment. I'm telling about the history inside the books. Why I say that? We tend to think that everyone at these times they have Bibles in their houses. And the answer is no. People here do not know how to read. To be fair, people start to read after the European Reformation. When Martin Luther, stuff like that, they translate to German the Bible, and they make free the people to read. Now the people are learning how to read. Before the European Reformation, just a fewer amount of people knows how to read. In times of Jesus, the people do not have an Old Testament in their houses. If they want to listen the Old Testament, they need to go to the temple or the synagogue. And the only ones who know how to read are the priests and the masters, the rabbis. Nobody else knows how to read. In times of New Testament, the people do not know how to read. For that reason, if you read the book of Revelation, you will see the letters to the church. John is sending the letter to an angel of the church, and the angel of the church read the letter in the church. Only one knows how to read. So the reading of writing process of the Bible comes when the people start to learn how to read. But it doesn't mean that they were written just a couple of years ago. No. There's something we call oral tradition, and I'll explain that. Then, I'll tell you. If we make a zoom in here in the book of Exodus, we will have these three books here. After that, comes the conquer of Canaan, and we have the book of Joshua. And after the conquer of Canaan starts the Judges era, the book of Judges here. And inside the story, the history story of the book of Judges happened the book of Ruth. They're happening at the same time. Then Israel have a king. Who was the first king? Nice. There comes Saul. We have the first book of Samuel and the second book of Samuel. In the first book of Chronicles, they have the same stories here. But we have the book of Kings and we have the second Chronicles covering all those two books.
Louis,
Yes, sir?
the apostles, all of them would have been able to read, correct?
No.
No. But they were right, a lot of them wrote.
No. I will explain this in the next class.
Okay, so a follow-up question would be, they would not have memorized the Torah, the apostles.
Yeah, they know it from memory.
They know it from memory just for someone speaking it.
Yeah. They have the, I will explain next class in the New Testament, but the writers, the apostles, and that's a very good question, much of them do not know how to write or read, but they have something they call amanuensis, that is a guide that you say what you need to write. Paul used it. Peter used it. But I will tell you, how can I explain it in English? Just give me a couple of seconds. Who knew how to write John? If you read the book of John, you will read a progression in the Greek. His first books, the book of Revelation, They have a lot of grammar errors. But if you read the book of John, the Gospel of John, it says that he's improving his Greek. But I will tell you a little bit more in the next class. But they don't know a lot how to write or read. They learned. Come to the next class.
By the time they got to Exodus, I'm thinking about Moses and he's getting the law on the tablets. They knew how to read.
Moses and Joshua and the people that he trained, but not the people.
But they could teach the people the law from the tablets.
Yeah, they can teach oral tradition. They repeat. For that reason, if you read the book of Numbers, chapter 6, the blessing, he says, repeat these words to your kids. Why? Because the way to teach was repeating. For that reason, and you have Psalms that repeat ideas. I will give you a keynote to understand the Genesis. The Genesis is written for kids. How do we know? The repetition. He created the plants, and comes the morning and the afternoon, and that's the first day. This repetition and God saw that it was good. That repetition is on purpose to record it on kids' brains. You can learn it, or you can, how can I say it? You can learn it better if you got repetition as a little song. For that reason, the book of Genesis, the creation has a function in Israel. Remember, you have a people coming from Egypt. Now you need to create a new nation. But they'll spend 400 years in Egypt. Now, how can you teach the law of God with a people that were 400 years in Egypt, learning from those goats and stuff like that? The Genesis comes with that repetition. And in case you don't know it, the book of Genesis is designed to, like a detox from Egypt. I'll explain. Who tend the women at the garden? The temptation, the fall of the man? The snake, right? Why a snake? Do you remember what is the symbol of the Pharaoh in Egypt? A snake. And the symbol of the Babylonian kings? Snake. And the symbol of Canaanite kings? Snakes. So when they read about snakes, they know what they are reading. If you read the book of Genesis chapter 1, he says he's creating the big monsters from the sea. Why the big monsters? They are talking about whales and stuff like that, sharks and stuff like that? Maybe, but also the name of Hebrew, and I can write it here, is Tiamat. Tiamat is a god from Babylon and Canaan. When they read that, God created your gods. Are you understanding? My God created your gods. My God is better than yours. That's the main topic of the creation chapters, Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. If you read the big trees, what the Babylonian kings and Canaanite have in their palaces? Trees. God created trees. So the moon and the sun, gods. Who created? God. I can explain a little bit more in a Genesis class, but I don't have much time to do it. Yes?
You were saying that the priests were the only ones that could read, and so you'd have to go to the temple. Who taught the priests to read?
That's beautiful. Tradition too. And I will explain a little bit more of that. They have the tradition. Aaron and their sons, they know how to read. Moses teach them how to read and how to write. And there comes from tradition and generation to generation, learning how to read, learning how to write, and how to read. And you can, if you read the book of Genesis, you can see those hints of who wrote it. If you read the chapter, for example, chapter 1 of Genesis, how they call God, Elohim. Elohim is a word very interesting, and I don't have much time to explain it, but I will, just a little key thing. How they call God tells you who are writing at this moment. They call it Elohim, Jehovah, Yahweh, and stuff like that. It talks about who's writing at that moment, because the priests, they have different traditions on how to call God. For that reason, there's another key. If you want to know who wrote the Old Testament, you need to put attention on how they call God. For example, that word God that we use in Genesis, the Elohim, you don't see it in the book of Samuel or the book of Kings. There's another guy writing. Are we okay with that? I know it's dense, but it's heavy, but I'm trying to explain a little more here. And we have, yes?
We've always been taught that Moses wrote the book of Genesis. He was not even alive during that time, so God told him what to write. That was part of everything he wrote during that time, was that whole book.
Okay, that's an interesting question. And let me tell you, there's a lot of discussion among scholars about who wrote the Torah, the Pentateuch. There's three theories about that. Theory number one, and they must believe it among Christians, Moses wrote it. The theory number two, Moses and Joshua did it. Theory number three, Israel wrote it. I'm not going to explain. We can spend like 6 months talking about that. And let me tell you, I'm explaining a class of 4 months. I'm trying to explain it in just one Sunday. It's difficult. But if you ask me personal, what I think is Moses and Joshua did it.
And God would have just told them.
Yeah.
This historical stuff. Like,
Yes. They are watching the history and they know how to write. Remember, it's inspired by God. Then they know what to read between Moses and Joshua. If you read it. So we are here, the book of Daniel. You have Ezekiel here. And you have the book of Ezra. In the same time, the book of Esther and the book of Nehemiah. But what is interesting here? During the time of the Second of Chronicles, we have Joel and Jonah. They write at the same time, but they don't know each other. In the same time, we have Isaiah, we have Hosea, we have Micah, and we have Amos. At the same time, they are writing. But they don't know each other. In the same time, we have Nahum, he was alone writing. And here we have Jeremiah, that he was close to Ezekiel. Maybe they know each other in the exile. And we have Zephaniah, Lamentations, he's the same that Jeremiah. And we have Habakkuk here and Obadiah. What is interesting here, if you want to understand the prophets a little bit better, you divide it in centuries. 6th century, 7, 8, and 9. To understand it better. And you can understand what happened in the world during this time, and you will understand why they are writing what they write. But that's the interesting thing. Do you know why I have the Psalms here and like that? Excuse me?
they're writing the whole time during this time.
That's the answer. The Psalm is not a book that was written in just one time. Remember, the Psalm is a compilation of songs. And that compilation starts here with the Psalm 90 that Israel wrote, and maybe Moses and Joshua. And we have, starting here, all the songs of Israel. When we have it as a whole book that we call Psalms, after the exile in Zachary time. Yes, sir?
So how many songs did David write? Because my Bible says the Psalm of David, the Psalm of David, the Psalm of the chief musician of David. It is a lot of them.
I will tell you a thing. We don't know. That's the short answer. Why I'm telling you that? It's not like today. If I write a song, I will put song, the copyright. Luis Alvarez did it. Give me my copyright. But in ancient times, it did not exist. The tradition attributes the psalm to David. But I will tell you something interesting about that. When you read the Psalms, you read, and I was talking to you last Sunday, you read the Zillah or Selah. Have you ever read it? Do you know what it means? It's a musical note. When you read Selah in a Psalms, it means that it's a psalm designed to be sing it. And the Selah note means stop. What? It's for taking a breath, but there's a spiritual meaning too.
David also responsible for a lot of music instruments. David was responsible for a lot of different music instruments.
They use a bunch of musical instruments for their psalms. The psalms was singing with musical instruments. Most of them, not all. How do we know? Musical notes in the Hebrew writing process. But what I want to tell you about the Selah note, when you are reading a psalm and you find Selah, it means stop, think about the Lord, and keep singing. It's a pause that you make to analyze what you are reading. There's a beautiful thing that we are reading. We need to stop, see God, see the work of God, and after your heart is full of God, you can keep singing. Are we okay with that? Okay. The Psalms is a hymn book that we have from the times of 1 Samuel to the book of Zechariah. How do we know that? If I use the word lit, L-I-T, it's a word that the youth group use a lot. It was lit. What it means? It was so cool. The word cool, you use it a couple of years before. You say, it was so cool. Now they say so lit. But lit, like L-I-T, lit. I need to learn a lot from them. They mention a lot of slangs that I don't understand, but I'm learning. And now I'm telling you this as an expert, just because I learned it. I didn't know that. When they mentioned it was lit, I was thinking like, what they say, maybe it's not cool. Yeah. They tell me lit means it's very good. And why I mentioned that, if you